Welcome to Delenta Activate, the podcast that brings you insights and stories from executive coaches and changemakers in the leadership space. I'm your host, Dr. Naeema Pasha from Delenta, and I'm excited to share with you the latest trends, best practices, and innovations in coaching and leadership development. In this podcast, you'll hear from experts who successfully coach leaders and teams to achieve their goals and overcome challenges and transform their organisations. Whether you're a coach, a leader, or someone who wants to grow personally and professionally, this is the podcast for you. So tune in, get inspired, and activate your potential with Delenta Activate. Hi there. So welcome to Delenta Activate. I'm so pleased to be here and even more pleased to be introducing to you today on the pod, Chris Alder. I'd just like to say hello, Chris. Do join us.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Chris, you're I'm just going to introduce you a bit more. Senior partner at Evolution, where you work with senior leaders, CEOs, executive teams, working on sort of really basically, as you describe it, productive work and collaborative ways and really kind of progressing them. And you're looking at your background, such an experienced coach, such an experienced person working in this field. It's like you're the ideal person for Delenta Activate, because there's so many people who are developing their coaching practice, developing their coaching business, developing their coaching within the roles that they're doing as leaders, managers, and so on. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights and, that you can share with us all. So thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Great to be here. It really is.
Oh, great. I did notice when you started it off, you were a chef.
I was a chef. Yeah, that was kind of one of the reasons I became a leadership coach. I mean, I left chefing, sort of 20 years ago. I started to leave chefing. It took me a while to actually make that full transition. But I saw such bad leadership in the catering industry. I mean, Gordon Ramsay is your classic kind of chef manager, isn't he? And it's just military style leadership. So when I trained to become a coach 15 years ago now, and I thought, well, what kind of coach do I want to be? It's just like, I felt the pain of having no support as a leader in the catering industry. And I was like, I need to give back. I need to give back to people to learn leadership. And that sort of led into executive coaching and sort of working with more senior leaders.
That's fantastic introduction. I'm going to keep you on the chefing theme of just because it's kind of like, first of all, so interesting and that you do that. I want to ask you a little bit about your chef style, but before I do that, you just mentioned about the leadership style. Yes, I've worked with some people that work with the Heston Blumenthal group and the kind of organisations that he's worked in, and then worked with more broadly around hospitality. And you're absolutely right. That as many people know, and you've experienced, and I've come across as well, that kind of leadership style that people feel is needed. Now, might they argue that they look to get the exacting standards, because this is not just about food, it's about creativity, it's about theatre, it's about this experience for somebody who comes in for the diner, that you've got to push hard, and if you don't, well, just stay at home and make beans on toast. And how would you kind of can I just ask you that, really?
Of course, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to push hard, isn't there? There is the control and command, dominate, sort of push people down as a way to break them. And I never got formally trained. I just kind of learned on the job. But I worked with a lot of chefs that had worked with, Marco Pierre White and a lot of the big names like that. And they break you down. Like, that is their process. It is a bit like the military boot camp. They will just cut your personality away, and any sort of, ego that you've got, they want to cut away. And that is one approach. But I think there are a lot more progressive approaches now to actually get the most out of people, to actually motivate them to do the best themselves rather than have to force them to do that. But I saw so much bad practice in the industry, and I just didn't want to do it that way. And when I became a head chef, I was lost because I didn't have any other role models. It was like I'd learned that way. So it's an interesting industry, and it's changed a lot in the past 20 years. Let's just say that.
It has changed a lot, but I still understand from the work I've been doing. It's still, there's so much of it still, that culture is still there. It's in other industries as well, finance, work the 20 hours a day kind of thing, or whatever it is. But yeah, tell me a little bit more about, you said head chef. Tell us about your, if you can indulge us, tell us about your culinary expertise and your.
I had a very varied career. I mean, I grew up on the Isle of Wight, so a very tourist industry place. So I started cooking when I was about 13, 14 in pubs and restaurants just to make money in the summer holidays. So when I dropped out of university, I was studying a mathematics degree of all things.
Wow.
Wasn't really right for me. And I just went back to cooking just as a way to travel. So I really financed it to see the world. So I did a little work in the French Alps, I worked ski resorts, and then I ended up on private yachts in the south of France. So I did the whole below deck thing. I was 4 years in the private chef industry on yachts, cooking for millionaires, billionaires, and that taught me a lot, a
Oh,
lot about high
come on.
pressure. And
I mean, we all really want you to spill names and details, but I guess you won't be able to spill names unless don't let me stop you though. But tell
no,
us a
no,
little bit about that, because that does, I mean, come on, that really links into work and people,
absolutely,
relationships, and tell us a
yeah.
little bit about that, what you learned from it.
I think that the biggest takeaway is money cannot buy you happiness. And what
Really?
a great thing to actually see, see these
Yeah,
billionaires. And, the boats I was working on, they're massive now with 40, 50 crew. There were sort of 7 or 8 crew when I was working on these boats. You got to know the owners quite well. I'd meet with them every day, discuss menus, I'd see their life, meet their kids. And most of them were not happy people. And
really.
you'd see the drama going on in their families and all the drama going on with all the staff, some of them had hundreds of staff around the world between their private houses and their yachts. And you're like, are these the people we're aiming to be? Is this where our culture is going? Everyone wants to be these people, yet when you meet them, they're actually more unhappy than most of us because they've got so much to lose and they've got so much to manage with the
Is that
yachts
what
and the
it is? I was going to
houses.
push you on that because
Yeah.
what? Because I mean, first of all, how reassuring. I've just had a family wedding and there was much drama, let me tell you. So I feel reassured that
Every family has drama, yeah.
that the elite class has that as well. But yeah, just this is pertinent to our world, our
Mm,
aspirations, how we move forward in our career, particularly as you work with executives, people aspiring to be C-suite executives or whatever this kind of role. What is it that what was it that that blocked their happiness, if I can put it that way?
mm.
What was the block?
God, there's so many factors to that question. But yeah, to answer it simply, I think they were just blinded by the lifestyle in which they were in.
Wow.
And it's a trap, isn't it? It's like so many things you can get into just trap you. And the last family I worked for, I won't mention their names, but they were just starting to get in with the British royalty. And Prince Harry came to stay in one of the houses when I cooked for them. And that was like their next level. And you could see that's what they were then aiming for. Even though the guy was a billionaire, it was now to hang out with royalty more. So there was always more. So they're
Mm,
always measuring themselves about, against who was above them, who had the
mm,
bigger yacht, or who hang out with royalty more, who got invited to more royal weddings or such like. So they were always feeling below, which sounds crazy when we
yeah,
look at them from our
yeah,
position and we see
yeah.
them so high in this, you know, crazy world we call, lifestyle and
Mm,
money. But they were comparing themselves as well. And that's what made them unhappy, just like makes us unhappy if we start comparing and
yeah.
thinking we have a lack.
Mm,
So I think a
yes.
lot of that comes into my coaching work is informed by what I saw and what I experienced in those days.
I can honestly, thank you for that insight, because we will read it, we research. I did research on happiness for one of my masters, and it was all of the aspirant, how we measure ourselves as well. That kind of, and why unhappy nations tend to be those that are driven like
Mm.
this, all that kind of thing that we know. But that's just me doing my research. I wasn't watching it. I wasn't watching people
Yep.
saying, "Are we going to
Yep.
go to Harry's next gig with Meghan Markle?" We weren't there. You were there, so you giving us that is incredible. And obviously, there's so much there about happiness and how we measure ourselves and success. So that kind of, I think, perfectly comes into just asking me a little bit more about you. What I mean, the first thing that you and I've discussed, actually, because I just admit to everybody here, I was so excited by your work. I sent you about 400 questions that you had to wade through. Look, can I ask about this? Can I ask about this? So one of the things that you mentioned was, I mean, what role does executive coaching play in the development of a conscious business? I think probably
Yeah.
what we need to do is
Mm.
define those last two words first.
Absolutely. I was going to start there as well. So, I now work with Evolution, which is a, international coaching consultancy that really focuses on conscious businesses that really have a purpose, a deeper meaning, that really
Mm,
want to make a change in the world. And I'd say that that's the shift that can really bring more happiness, as you know, as I'm sure you found out in
Yeah.
a lot of your research. That's actually what gives happiness, is doing something for others, doing something for the world, and feeling
Yeah.
good about that. So, working for and supporting companies like that is a great honor. And the role of executive coaching within that can sometimes be focused on more the external, like what is the company doing? What is the product they're offering? How are they making the world better? And so many of the C-suite executives get lost in that, and they
Mm,
forget that there's the internal element of a conscious business. Like, how conscious are they as leaders? How
mm,
well are they treating their staff? What's the culture like? And that has to come along at the same time. Otherwise, it creates massive imbalance. And there's so much research done, especially for executives in the non-profit world, and they're so
mm.
burnt out. They're so burnt out trying to
No,
save the
yeah,
world, they burn themselves out.
no,
So
yeah, sorry, go on.
yeah, so much of my work is really just helping those leaders of conscious businesses be more conscious themselves, be more conscious in themselves. And if they're really driven around creating a more sustainable world, well, how are they being sustainable with themselves? Are they creating harm to themselves? Are they creating harm in their relationships at work, as well as harm in the planet? And can we actually address all three of those elements to actually create real sustainability in the world, not just try and deal with the damage we're creating externally, but look at all the damage we're creating internally.
Mm. On a podcast, obviously it's voice, but I kind of want to underline it, or what you just said, or put it in a highlighter, because it's so important. It's so important, because I follow a funny Instagram account about non-profits and how hard they treat people.
Mm,
People put things up on there, can you come, and you come on the weekend, but it's for the client, it's for our stakeholders. They need you, and all that kind of thing. And it shows that there's so many practices, and perhaps not dissimilar to your chefing world, where people
exactly.
go through so far, to talk much more. So I wanted to ask you a bit more about creating conscious businesses, because there seems to be a mismatch. And there is some research about people who talk about mission-led business, spiritual-led businesses, that they can, in some way, and people, the big one that we hear all the time, we're a family, and that can create false, sort of overt loyalty in employees, and people going above and beyond. And like I said, about similar to chefing. What just Can you just comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's driven, as we were
Mm,
discussing earlier with, your millionaires and your billionaires, they're driven, and then we can get driven by purpose. And just as unhealthily as it can be driven by money, you can be driven by purpose as well as unhealthy ways. So
mm,
it's just about becoming really conscious to yourself, to each other, and see if it's sustainable. I'm all into sustainability in these three dimensions, kind of the I, we, and it. We can look at the it dimension, which is the product or the service we're offering, but the we dimension is the relationship and the culture, and the I dimension is the individual. So, how
brilliant.
can we be sustainable in all three of those areas? Otherwise, whatever we're doing, it's not going to work. We're going to burn ourselves out, and then the business goes bust, and then we failed in our mission. So, that hasn't worked.
That's So I want to ask you a little bit more about how you define and achieve a sustainable business leadership transformation. But just
Yeah,
before that, or if you can integrate your answer in, when you work with organizations doing this, do you encounter major resistance? Because this is a model that is different to the existing model of business.
absolutely. There's always resistance when you try and bring about any kind of change, whether it's personal change in an individual or it's collective change in a whole organization. There'll always be pushback from the system, because the system, in a way, even if it's not functioning correctly or well, it wants to stay stable.
Mm,
And it's trying to understand why it's trying to stay stable, what beliefs are driving the behavior, which is, really at the root of my work, whether that's, one-on-one executive coaching or whether it's team coaching, working with the whole executive team. I'm trying to uncover what are those limiting beliefs that even the individual is holding on to, about what they need to do to be successful, loved, happy, included, all those base human things that we desire in life. When we're young, we normally create assumptions about how we need to be to get them.
mm,
So, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, but the coaching I use is very therapeutic, because I'm trying to dig up those assumptions and limiting beliefs and help the client see them. Because a lot
mm.
of the time they're running unconsciously right at the back. There's a unconscious script that they're just not aware of. But when you actually pull it out and you go, oh, okay, so you believe you have to work 20 hours a day in order to be loved and
Yeah.
successful. And the client goes, oh yeah, that is a bit crazy, isn't it? I can see that now. But you have to hold up the mirror quite firmly
Oh
because
God.
they don't see it. Because again, they're so lost in their drive to achieve whatever they're trying to achieve. So for me, that's the linchpin of sustainability in any change process, whether it's an individual or a whole group or a whole business, is uncovering those limiting beliefs that were normally created, a long, long time ago and are completely outdated.
I wish I'd met you with your mirror, in my career, because I think there might be additional things about aspirations to our sense of being judged. That if I don't do the 20, even though I think I might not even get promoted, and I've been passed over a few times, say, and then but you're still doing it, and you're still doing it in that in because you just feel, how will I be judged and things. So I think there's you being able to come in and enable people to be free from that mindset is
Yeah.
it's going to be quite transformational. But coming back to what you just said about if you're achieving sustainable leadership transformation, you talk about the practice of modern leadership development. But just tell me a bit more about that and how we can, because the structures, as you say, are still those ones that we had before. So the 20-hour show up, we've got this whole discussion of hybrid, get back in the office, we've got dismantling of DEI teams around the world, and all sorts of things are going on. So we're pushing against swimming against the tide a bit, the stream, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we are. And if we step back and look at the bigger picture, we're not. There is progress happening,
Okay, thank
overall. I
you.
mean, look at the 60s, 70s, 80s, you
Yeah.
look at the business practices we were doing then, like they're horrendous now. We would never dream of doing that again. So if we look at a deep time, big picture perspective, progress is happening. And of course, progress is always bumpy, isn't it? There'll be, two steps back, one step forward sometimes.
That's
But I
true.
think what we have to hold that ultimately, I mean, I love to strip out leadership and business right back to the basics. That a business is just one or more person in relationship trying to do something in the world. And relationship is the key word. If the relationships aren't healthy, if the way in which everyone is interacting isn't working and functioning, the business won't be successful. It really ultimately comes down to that because we're human beings, we're relational beings. We have to relate to each other. So much of my coaching work really is interpersonal. It's helping people in their interpersonal relationships and helping people see how they're causing harm in their interpersonal relationships because of their unconscious beliefs and their unconscious drivers.
That's it, isn't it? You've really reached a nub of where we are, and perhaps this is part of the core of what you might describe as modern leadership development, looking at these sort of drivers and behaviours. So it comes to this really interesting work that you've done, which is really kind of got into, and I was looking at, was about metaphors and
Mm.
driving leadership change and so on. So first of all, just can you introduce us to the ideas around metaphors, and then tell us
Yeah,
more about how we can perhaps apply that?
absolutely. So the coaching school I studied with is a coaching school called Integral Coaching Canada, based in Ottawa. And they base their coaching approach on integral theory and the work of Robert Keegan, which is called subject-object theory, which is really tying into some of the things I've already said about uncovering those unconscious beliefs. And some of the best way I find, and this is in the coaching approach I use, is to use metaphor. Because
Mm.
if you're talking to someone and you're finding out about how they show up as a leader, and say they're really driven, they're really fast, their interpersonal interactions aren't that good, but they get everyone to the destination on time, and you can try and feed that back to them. You can try and hold up the mirror, and they go, "Yeah, that's kind of me, isn't it?" But the conversation might stop. But how can you actually help someone see themselves more clearly? And the metaphor can really help there. So for a leader like that, I might, take in everything they're saying to me and really, I use meditation to kind of go inside and see what metaphor might depict their leadership style. And for someone very driven like that, who's maybe very linear in their thinking, I might offer the metaphor, say something like the dutiful London bus driver.
Right.
And if I've managed to really kind of understand who they are and their approach, hopefully they'll kind of laugh and also feel a bit like awkward because they feel quite seen. And they go, yeah, that kind of is how I show up at work. I am pretty much like a dutiful London bus driver. I get everyone to their destination on time. Great. But Like at what cost? And how do I handle stoppages in the road? How do I handle having to go different routes? A dutiful London bus driver doesn't know how to handle those things. So through the use of a metaphor, the client starts to really explore themselves in a third person object. They can look at themselves out there and go, oh, what would the dutiful London bus driver do in that situation? Or what assumptions is the dutiful London bus driver holding on to that means they keep showing up like that? So it's a really safe way to have someone explore themselves. And, change, I see, has to start with awareness first. You can't change something unless you're deeply aware of it and what's going on. And so many people are unaware of themselves. So the use of a metaphor, I find, is just, it's more fun as well. It's a lot nicer than talking about the person and what they're doing at work. We talk about the dutiful London bus driver instead. And the person's objectifying themselves. They're gaining distance from their self, their emotions, their behaviors, and they're actually able to see themselves more clearly, the good and the bad sides of themselves, and be more objective. And then they can see what needs to change in a completely different way than if you were just talking about them.
That's very. Oh yeah, I'm actually thinking about the applying it to myself as you say it, because it's such a powerful thing, isn't it? It's a mixture of storytelling and metaphor.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking, yeah, exactly. I'm like thinking, what about you're doing the bus driving, you're being the dutiful bus driver, doing the job, doing it diligently, because you care about getting to the.
Exactly.
But I'm thinking, what about me as the dutiful bus driver?
Absolutely.
About my well-being, and I did. I mean, there's not even a metaphor. There's a literal thing. The experience through COVID, how many bus drivers got COVID because they were doing the thing and they weren't able. We could take that as a metaphor as well, but literally, there's because so many executives, I'm sure you'll probably say, is that about burnout and mindset thinking, well, how do they that's just come to me, as it were, through your metaphor. Just
exactly. Yeah, we think in metaphors all the time. It's just like we think in images, and it's just a really powerful way to help a client to see themselves. And of course, I'm always offering that metaphor. And if the client says, no, that doesn't feel right, it feels more like the loyal London taxi driver, I'm like, great, let's go with that. Let's go with that. It's similar, but different. So,
or whatever.
That's kind of the first part of the method I use, and that's just helping the client see themselves more clearly. And then I'll always offer them a new way metaphor. Like, who could they be that's different? So instead of them trying to be different and upgrade the dutiful London bus driver, which is what a lot of people try and do, they just try and do what they're already doing better, which is still stuck in the same belief systems and the same assumptions. I offer a new way metaphor. So for a client like that, maybe it's more grounded, maybe it's more collaborative, maybe it's like the grandfather tree in the forest or something like that. And the client be like, oh, I'd love to be more like that. I'd love to be more grounded and have a group of other trees around me to help make happen what I'm trying to do. I'd love to be in a forest. I'd love to feel less lonely. So then the client goes on this journey of going from one metaphor to the other, and they build all the competencies and the muscles they need to sort of make that transformational journey, which is a very creative form of coaching.
It's an incredibly creative, very deep. I think it goes into our psyche quite a lot.
It does.
I wonder, again, like I gave you, jokingly ask you about examples about the billionaires and things. Are there other the people are clearly not mentioning them or anything like that, but just some almost like a little something that a story. Can you tell us a story of that happening, just of what happened and the impact and things?
Yeah, I suppose I'll bring in the sort of concept of shadow work, because I do shadow work within my coaching as well, which is really looking at these unconscious parts of yourself that you've disowned. And, one former leader I was working with, felt powerless. He disowned his power. He grew up in a situation where, had a very sort of bullying father, so he didn't feel powerful at all. But he ended up being a very senior leader in a very large organization. But he still felt powerless. So when you feel powerless, you end up showing up as more powerful than you need to. So I won't share his metaphor that I offered because they will identify him, and I don't want to identify him. But it was a metaphor around being someone very powerful, but almost like bullying. And through the coaching work, he started to actually see that he's using way more power than he needs to because he felt powerless. That was the assumption that we really uncovered, that we made an object in his awareness that had been unconscious. And he started to see how he was causing harm in a way he did not want to be causing harm, but he couldn't see it before because his power is in shadow. And it was coming out without him really being aware of how powerful he actually was. And there's so many leaders are like that. So many leaders are creating so much harm. They're playing out their like childhood
Mm.
dramas, and it impacts thousands of people that they're leading, thousands. So,
Uh,
that's what I'm most proud of is being able to help leaders like that shift their leadership style, shift the way in which they show up with other people, and drastically change the lives of thousands of people, not just their own.
it's very powerful, and I think people listening, watching this would be just on. I feel like I'm on a river of you, kind of going, on a boat on a river, and you're leading, and I'm seeing all these things happen around me and experiencing them. It's quite profound. So, huge congratulations for you to do this work, and clearly the impact is there. You're making these profound changes. I wondered, you know, in a positive way, what you said is that when we start doing these things collectively, maybe that we can start making some shifts. Do you feel that, or what's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, coaching is just becoming so much more popular. Like that alone is a great shift forward because whatever coaching approach you're using, it's about helping people create awareness. People are
Mm,
waking up to themselves on a deeper level.
mm,
And, spirituality in the spiritual world is a huge part of my life as well. I'm also a Zen
mm,
priest. So, I weave these elements into my work, and a lot of the leaders that come to me because of that. And I think we are on that journey of awakening more. We are helping everyone in the world wake up just a little bit more, become a little bit more conscious of themselves. And when we can start doing that together within businesses, and I think that's really the power of a conscious business, is when almost the focus of the business is not just what the business does, but it's about the impact it has on all the employees, which Robert Keegan calls a deliberately developmental organization, a
mm.
DDO. And I love that phrase. It's like then business is a force for good. Business
Mm.
is a way to help everyone become a better version of themselves, as well as make a good product and make money. But that's not the driving focus.
That Tom Peters, the management guru, I forget, Strive for Excellence or something. I forgot what he's called. One of those. He says
Hmm,
business. People say business is part of the community because that's business is the community. We have to
exactly.
consider, and he's one of the gurus that people on MBAs and always learning about that kind of thing. So to think that we are the community, we're all part of whatever branch
Exactly.
we are. Well, that's fantastic. There is one final question because I think it's been so fascinating. I just want to ask you just to go, well, we've started off in, building up almost from kind of experience going through something, and now it's a really esoteric kind of philosophy and spiritualism and your Zen practice as well, which I think in the way you describe the tree is both grounded, you
Mm.
ground yourself, but also up in the sky, like the tree with the in the atmosphere. So, but the world is, and you've been really positive, and I'm hoping you're going to reassure us all. There's no pressure at all. But I'm really one of the things I wanted to know is about how growing companies kind of face how they, in this current climate of all this social, technological, political change that we're experiencing across the world, but what we see on our TVs and the UK and US, for example, and the Middle East and so on, there seems to be so much upheaval. How can organisations in this climate, do you feel, what contribution can we make from the
Mm.
work that we do to
Yeah.
help?
I think it's the fact that we are constantly evolving. I think there is a push to kind of go back. There is that kind of
Yeah,
regression sort of, yeah, we need to go back and live on the land and grow for ourselves. And yeah, I grow a lot of my own food here. I believe in that. But I also believe we have to just keep going forward.
right.
Everything keeps evolving. Our businesses are evolving. The way in which we interact with each other is evolving. And I see that again, if we take that deep time perspective, there is change, there is positive change happening. It's easy
Okay.
to forget that.
Mm,
So businesses just need to keep evolving. And we see that, with the classic like blockbusters and things like that, they didn't evolve and they disappeared. So we can't fix anything down. Everything is in flux. That's kind of what spirituality tells us when you actually really get into it. Nothing is certain, nothing is fixed. Everything is evolving constantly. So if a business can really take that perspective and be in the uncertainty, be in the ambiguity, the whole VUCA world that we are starting to wake up to now, to
Mm.
surf that, then I think we can start to make a difference. But
How
if we try and fix things and get lost in a fixed mindset and think that things have to be fixed, then
Right.
we keep running into problems.
Can I ask this last thing then about if we're surfing it? I'm kind of thinking, across the country, we've got more influence of a different politics coming in, and lots of, for example, lots of diversity teams are being closed down, and because of a new climate and so on. What way do we preserve the values while we're riding it? How can we do that? Or should,
Yeah, I suppose, this is going a little theoretical, but I study integral theory and they talk about sort of holon theory, which is evolution happens through a transcend and include process. In a way, our consciousness and who we are and the way we show up keeps evolving, keeps getting bigger. We're including more. That's why DEI work has now come in so strongly, which is amazing. 100 years ago, it was completely unknown. Even 50 years ago, completely
yeah,
unknown.
yeah.
But why is that? It's confusing to think, why would people 50 years ago not even think about this? It's because we've actually grown our consciousness. We're now seeing this more.
Mm.
But we also need to transcend what came before. As you say, the values that we have. So it's that evolutionary process should always be transcend but include, transcend but include, transcend but include. And that's, in a way, how evolution has always worked and how evolution will continue to work. But how can we do that personally? How can we do that in our organizations to make sure we're just including more and more, but not getting lost in the complexity of it all, which is the surfing.
I honestly think that's so incredible. I hope people we'll have to record. Everybody watches it will have to rewind and watch the beginning just to take in these thoughts and ideas, because to me they give me a lot of hope, because sometimes it can feel a little bit, this is hard work, writing this and doing that, being an activist here and whatever, but it feels like, but what you said is that how evolution evolve and how we include and move forward, it gives me a lot of hope, and I hope it does for everybody listening. I think it's a fantastic thing to end on, Chris, if that's good with you. But there's going to be when it goes out, lots of connections to you and your work and how people can get in contact and do more great things with you. So hopefully that'd be amazing. But thank you so much.
Thank you for your great questions. I've absolutely loved this. I really have. I didn't know we were going to go in this direction. I loved where you took us. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Powered by Delenta, your all-in-one coaching platform.